last week I lost vision in my left eye, and it was the second time in a week that it happened where it just clouded over. And so my doctor was worried I was having a mini stroke. So I spent the weekend in the hospital doing tests, and at the end of it was a little bit inconclusive. The doctor there in the hospital feels 70% sure that's what it is. My wife feels 100% sure it's not what it is. And so who knows what happened. But it did certainly make me think about taking care of ourselves, taking care of our brains. And we want to be spirit-fueled, spirit-led writers, but God uses the gifts that He's given us and the bodies that He's given us. And so just stewarding them well is a priority in the long run, but also in just every day. And it just made me think about sharpness and just cognitive ability. And I know some of you guys are already thinking about it just from the aging standpoint. How do you maximize on what God's given you? How do you use what He's given you to the best of your ability? I've told most of you that I usually try to do all my writing in the morning. Um, Even when I first get out of bed is probably when I'm going to do the best writing. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but there's something like I start with a certain amount of grace, or just ability, like I've got change to spend, and I just start spending it until it's gone, and then I have to do other kinds of things. So anyway, I wrote a little bit about it this morning, and I'm going to keep thinking about it because I do think it's important that we seek God, seek His Holy Spirit, and also at the same time steward the natural side of things for how we are going to be used by Him. Bryan, can I let you introduce yourself and what you do and why you wrote a book and what kinds of things you write about, and how that um, pertains to the God's call on your life and the work that you do, just all that stuff. If you want to just give us your elevator pitch, but imagine we've got 400 floors to go up while you're talking.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you and maybe good afternoon. I'm not sure if everybody is all in the central time zone, but I am joining from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Malone, native Memphian, born and raised. Um, I am a HR advisor by profession. I also do some teaching, adjunct teaching part-time at the University of Memphis. And I've been in the HR space for about 5 years with FedEx, and but I've been with the company for about 30 years. So um, I like to tell people that I started right out of kindergarten, and just went straight to operations at the Memphis hub there. Um, but my background had primarily been in the engineering space, and right around 2018, 2019, I had gone through some personal challenges in my life. Plus, there were some things going on with the company that just kind of put me in a space where I had to think about, what was next for my life. And I really kind of started thinking about, what what was, what my purpose was. Um, and I kind of did some soul searching, um, and in the midst of that, I landed on, my passion being deeply connected to helping individuals become the best versions of themselves. And so, I started thinking about, okay, well, how can I do that, leveraging, what I had my previous experience and my corporate background. So, I made the transition from engineering into the world of human resources and learning about leader development and leadership development and coaching. And so, and in that space, in that span of time, I also went back to school and pursued a doctorate. I kind of got into a space where I started journaling. And I would just, write stuff down, and I would get up every morning, and try to find some time to hear from the Lord. And Jeff, like you, I think my morning time is really my best time um, when I'm most deeply into my thoughts. And so that's the prime time for me to do a lot of journaling. And I initially I was just writing down experiences that I was having, things that I was going through, um, and just my own thoughts, and I would write down scripture verses and things like that, um, to kind of go along with whatever I was facing at the time. And I had not originally thought about I thought that at some point I would write a book, but I had no idea how it was going to develop, what was going to come about, what it was going to be about, or anything like that. It just kind of started out as a notion or a thought that occurred in my mind, and I just kind of put it on the shelf and put it on the back burner. But over the course of 2023, as I began to get more consistent in journaling and journaling my thoughts, and just kind of reflecting on, um, you know, purpose, these thoughts and these journal entries kind of begin to take shape. And kind of how the book that I have out now, "Who Am I? A Rediscovery of Purpose," that's kind of how it started out. It birthed out as simply uh, journal entries that of some things that I had been going through personally, along with some things that God had been showing me from a topical standpoint. And finally, He just kind of gave me this thing to say, hey, you need to share this. You need to, because of what you're going through, you need to share this with other individuals, um, because there are a lot of people who you start out in one area of life. When you start out when you're young, we're taught to, go to college, get an education, get married, have a couple of kids, have a house, and life is great and life is grand. And then when you get into, your 30s, you're supposed to be at some particular point in your life, you're supposed to be here. And by the time you get in your 40s, you're supposed to be here. And all of a sudden you go through that, and things happen, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, what happened? I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not, and so even so much to the point where you start to lose sight of who you are, because you start to think that, hey, I'm not supposed to be going through a divorce. I'm not supposed to be um, uh, faced with this challenge, or going through this. This is, I thought, I'm not supposed to have lost my job. Um, or whatever the case may be. And so you know I wrote that book to speak to the person that kind of felt like I was feeling at the time in my life, where career changes, family changes, and just life in general kind of had me in a tailspin, to the point where you kind of lose yourself in you kind of get lost in the sauce, if that makes sense. The journaling turned into, and I said, okay, all right, so I think I have a concept for something, right? I have a concept for something, but what is it going to look like? I had not had any previous writing experience. I hated writing in school. Because I was more of a engineer type of guy. So, math was my thing. So not writing. Um, but um, ironically, I did have more of a creative art background. But writing was never my thing. Um, I started searching for some help in that area as far as, who could I partner with to, help take my thoughts and go from journal entries to some sort of outline to some sort of workable manuscript. And I started searching around, and I don't know, it must have been by the grace of God. I'm not sure how, Jeff, we ended up aligning, but I found your contact information and I contacted Jeff. And, he put me in touch with Rebecca Yehos, who's been um, a really, really instrumental in helping to take my thoughts and my voice and put it down on paper in a way that makes sense to where people can read it. And so we got to work in 2024. Um, I was able to take my notes, and from there we worked on a manuscript. We worked on an outline first, and then we took the outline, or I took the outline and I took it to Jeff and to Rebecca, and they were able to take it and put it into a manuscript. And in 2023, was it 2023? 2024, 2024, October 2024, the book was finally published. I went to Barnes and Noble, and I spoke with the store manager, and again, just introducing myself and introducing the book, just letting them know, hey, I'm a local author. And they were willing to, work with local authors, first time authors, to kind of help them get their book launched and get it off the ground, and help in that way. And so uh, we set up a time. I set up the time to meet with the store manager, and we looked at the schedule, and we put a date out there to have the book launch. And from there, I went to work, working on the launch, working on what it was going to look like. I had to go and research, do a little bit of research as to, because I never done a book launch before, so I didn't know what went into it, how it was supposed to be formatted. Um, and again, with me being an engineer and kind of trying to, start with the end and work backwards, I'm trying to come up with structure and what it looks and what it's supposed to look like based on what I've researched. And so I go and I get my supplies, the things that I need, and make sure that the bookstore has ordered enough copies. Because essentially, what will happen is, particularly with the bookstores and partnering with the bookstores, they will order, and some of you may already know this, but they will order a certain number of copies initially just to see how it does. Um, it's based on sales, and so if it looks like, in my particular case, they ordered 25 books, and we ended up selling, out of 25, we ended up selling 19 of those copies. So not too bad for 2 hours worth of, actually 3 hours worth of work at the book launch. Um, and just kind of thinking about, uh, some different things to do while the people were there. Coming up with little incentives, little giveaways. Um, just kind of, you know, it was almost like planning a birthday party, sort of, or a get together, right? You know, I created a flyer for the event, and posted it to my social media handles, and I would go and I would do a weekly, I would post weekly on my social media in the weeks leading up to the event. I would do like a live reel, or I do a live just so that people could see my face. It's one thing if they see, they see the flyers, but if they see your face and they know that, hey, okay, here's a real person that, that's inviting me out to an event, um, then, they may be more inclined to, be more inclined to put it on their calendars to come out for the event. But, um, so yeah, it was, it was a lot of work that went into, actually, planning the event. And, well, had I been thinking, I'd have brought some pictures for me from the actual event there, but I do have some pictures there on my phone. Um, but it turned out well. We had it on a Saturday, so it was a lot of foot traffic coming in through the store anyway. Um, so in addition to the people that I actually invited to come out to the book signing, there were people that were already there, that were just coming to the store to visit anyway, that were stopping by the table and asking questions about, the book and asking about me. And so, it really does become like a sales pitch where, not only are you talking about your book, but you're talking about yourself. Um, and just, connecting with people. Um, and what was funny was how I thought about the book signing and the way that it should go. Because usually, um, you start off kind of mingling with the people that are coming in and out of the store. You're talking to them, you're telling them about the books, things like that. And in some instances, or at some point, you may, welcome the guests for coming out, thank them for coming out. Maybe you share some sort of maybe you share an excerpt from the book, along with whatever insights you want to share with the readers. And you could probably still do that. But the way that it went for my particular book signing, and maybe it was just because, I'm a first time author and, not really known. Um, it was just really more of a mingling with the people that would come by the table, mingling with the guests. People would come, they ask questions. I just tell them about the book. Um, and, and I I had planned to do some giveaways. Like I'd planned to do like, and you can, and this is something that you can still do. Like I did like three giveaways. I gave away like a free copy of the book, a signed copy, or I did, a gift card, a Barnes and Noble gift card. So like maybe you go and purchase a gift card and you do a giveaway just kind of as a thank you for signing, for coming out to the book signing and purchasing a book. Um, Maybe you do a bookmark or something like that. So those just kind of like little things that I did kind of on top of just the additional just mingling with the guests throughout the book signing. So all in all, it was a great experience. Like I said, I learned a little bit about how the actual process works in putting one together. Also learned as far as like working with or partnering with, bookstores, in terms of, what you get in terms of royalties. So like um, if you, uh, obviously if you sell a certain number of books, you will receive, royalties from that book, from those book sales. But depending on where you get them from, it may be more if they just like, for example, the royalty percentage working with the bookstore going to the author, and this may be negotiable. Um, may not be as much as it would be if you were to just say if you were to go through Amazon. Like if they would have gone to Amazon, maybe that royalty to you is you know, 20%, and I'm totally making that up, but it's maybe the royalty is 20% of every book sale, right? You get to keep that. Whereas if you go through the the Barnes and Noble or a third party to, where they're carrying your books, your royalty may be, 10%. Because, obviously they have to make, their percentage as well. So it's just, those type of things that little nuances and working through that I learned about that experience. Um, and so um, I may do another one. I've have one in mind. Here's more of I'm thinking of partnering with well, I have partnered with a local bookstore in the Memphis area called Novel. They carry a couple of copies in the book. Um, because what happens is, um, bookstores will order, especially if you're a first time author, they'll order a certain number. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20 books or something like that. It's really just a test to see how, if they're going to sell and see what the demand is like. Obviously, if the books fly off the shelf, great, they'll order more and they may order a bigger copy. Maybe they order 50 books or 100 books. But just starting out, they order a small amount because what happens is, they most bookstores, um, they have to be able to order returnable books because if they don't sell and they're just sitting on the shelves, then they'll return them, right? So they have to, that they'll send them back. Um, and I actually had to, um, I actually had to reconfigure like um, how my distribution was with Amazon, because in order to so we have a distribution with Amazon, right, to distribute the book, but then there's also Ingram Spark, which also does distribution, and so they kind of work in conjunction to whereas if you do a distribution through Ingram Spark, typically bookstores will want you to be able to make those books returnable. Okay. So that way it protects them in case they order a certain number of books and they don't sell, then they can just send them back to Ingram Spark. And then you have to make a choice whether either you're gonna, keep those books or, they may give you the option that you may say, well, I don't want to keep them. They'll destroy them. Um, so you do have those options there. So that was something else that I learned throughout that process too, is just kind of like from the actual, you know, business side of you know, um, book writing and publishing a book and distributing a book, some of the behind the scenes stuff that I learned throughout that process. So, um, but that's me pretty much in a nutshell.